One night in 1978, four young people were closing up a fast food restaurant. The next morning, the restaurant was found unlocked. The lights were still on. The back door was standing wide open, and all four of them were gone. Their coats were still hanging on the rack. One of their cars was still sitting in the parking lot. Everything about that place said the workers had just stepped away for a moment. Except they hadn't stepped away. They had vanished into the night. And here is where this case turned tragic before it even began. Some money was missing from the restaurant, and so the police made an assumption, a reasonable-sounding, catastrophic assumption. They figured these were just kids who had grabbed the cash and run off, skipped town. Nothing to panic about. That assumption cost precious hours. It cost evidence, and it may have cost any chance of ever solving what really happened. Because 2 days later, those four young people were found in the woods, murdered. His name, her name, all of their names deserve to be remembered. And more than 40 years later, no one has ever been arrested for what was done to them. This is the Burger Chef murders, and it is a case that was lost before anyone even realized it was a case.
Let me tell you who they were. It was November of 1978 in Speedway, Indiana, a suburb of Indianapolis. And on the night of the 17th, four employees were working the closing shift at a Burger Chef, which at the time was one of the biggest fast food chains in America. The oldest was Jayne Friedt. She was 20 years old, and she was the assistant manager, the one in charge that night, the responsible one, the one who would lock up. Then there was Ruth Ellen Shelton. She was 18. And there were two 16-year-old boys, Daniel Davis and Mark Flemmons. Kids, really. Teenagers working an after-school job, the kind of first job millions of people have, earning a little money, hanging out with coworkers, closing up a restaurant on a cold Indiana night. Four young people, one just out of her teens, one 18, and two who were only 16, with nothing more dangerous on their minds than counting the register and mopping the floor and going home. They would do all of that, count the register, close the store. And then, somewhere between locking that door and driving home, all four of them were taken. The restaurant closed for the night as normal. And at some point after closing, something happened inside that Burger Chef. We don't know the exact sequence because there were no surviving witnesses, and as we'll see, the scene itself was destroyed. But what investigators later pieced together is that the four employees were abducted from the restaurant, taken from it alive, out the back, and driven away into the dark. Some money, a few $100s, was gone from the safe or the registers. On the surface, it looked like a robbery. Someone comes in around closing, takes the cash, and forces the workers to leave with them. But almost nothing about it added up cleanly, even from the start. Jayne Friedt's personal belongings and her car were left behind. The employees' coats were left hanging up on a cold November night. Who walks out into an Indiana November without their coat, unless they have no choice? Small details screaming that these four had not left willingly. But those details were not read that way, not at first. And that misreading is the beating, tragic heart of this entire case.
Because when the morning crew arrived and found the place open and empty, the story they were told and the story the police first believed was a very different one.
Here is the assumption that broke this case. Because money was missing, and because the 4 employees were gone, the early theory, the one that took hold in those first critical hours, was that the workers themselves had done it, that these teenagers had robbed their own restaurant and taken off, run away with the cash. It sounds almost unbelievable now, knowing how it ended, but put yourself in 1978 in a quiet suburb where a fast food job going wrong meant at worst some missing money and some kids who'd skipped town. Nobody's first thought was mass murder. And so the restaurant, the crime scene, was not treated as a crime scene at all. It was cleaned up, wiped down, tidied, and reopened for business. Let that sink in. The single most important place in this entire case, the room where 4 young people were abducted, was scrubbed clean and back to selling burgers before anyone understood that a horror had happened there. Whatever that scene could have told investigators, fingerprints, a dropped item, a sign of struggle, a trace of whoever came through that door, was mopped away by well-meaning staff and lost forever. If you've seen my other cases, you know how sickeningly common this is. The evidence destroyed not by the killer, but by ordinary people who simply didn't know yet. Quick word before we go on. If these cases haunt you like they haunt me, subscribe. There's a new one every week. Now, 2 days later, the truth came out of the woods.
On the 19th of November, 2 days after the 4 disappeared, their bodies were found. They were in a wooded area in Johnson County, some 20 miles from the restaurant. All 4 of them, Jayne, Ruth, Daniel, and Mark, taken out to that lonely stretch of trees and killed. I'm not going to detail how they died. It was violent and it was cruel, and these were 4 young people, 2 of them children, and they are owed more than a description of their wounds. What matters is this: it was not quick, and it was not merciful, and it was done to all 4 of them, out there in the cold, far from anyone who could help. And there was a detail that has always chilled investigators. The way the 4 were killed was not uniform. The methods differed between the victims. To some, that has suggested more than one killer, that this was not a lone robber who panicked, but a group, 2 or more people acting together, capable of taking 4 victims out to the woods and carrying out something this deliberate. 4 kids who closed a restaurant, found murdered in the trees 2 days later, in a way that suggested they never had a chance.
Once the bodies were found, everything changed. Now it was unmistakably a quadruple homicide. And now the full weight of law enforcement came down on it. But it was too late for the thing that mattered most. The restaurant, the abduction scene, was gone. Cleaned, reopened, its secrets erased days earlier. The investigation was starting from behind, and it never caught up. Investigators worked it hard. They chased leads for years, decades even, because a crime this shocking, 4 young workers slaughtered, does not let a community rest. But they were fighting the same enemy that haunts so many of these cases: a lost scene, primitive forensics by today's standards, and a trail that had gone cold before it was ever recognized as a trail at all. There were suspects, there were theories, some of them serious,
but the physical evidence that might have tied a name to that night had, in large part, already been thrown away with the mop water on the 18th of November. And so, over the years, the Burger Chef murders became what they remain today, one of the most infamous, most frustrating, most completely unsolved cases in the history of Indiana.
So let me talk about the theories, carefully, the way I always do, because no one has ever been charged, and suspicion is not proof. The first and simplest is robbery gone wrong. That someone came in at closing to take the money, panicked, and decided to eliminate the witnesses. It fits the missing cash, but it struggles to explain the sheer effort. Why abduct 4 people, drive them 20 miles, and kill them in different ways when a robber's instinct is to grab the money and run? The second theory is that this was not really about the restaurant at all, that one of the 4 or someone connected to them was the real target, and that the robbery was either a cover or incidental. Over the years, investigators looked hard at whether one of the victims had a connection to drugs, to the wrong people, that might have brought this down on all 4 of them. It's a theory that has been explored seriously, but never proven. And the third is simply the wall this case always hits, that whoever did this, one person or several, was never identified, because the evidence that could have named them was destroyed in those first 2 days, and everything after has been an attempt to rebuild a picture from ashes. Every road ends the same way. No arrest, no trial, no answer for 4 families.
I want to say something about how badly the start of this case was handled. Not to blame anyone, but because it's the lesson at the center of it. Nobody who cleaned that restaurant did anything wrong on purpose. They were employees and managers who genuinely believed, because that's what they'd been told, that some kids had run off with the register money. Cleaning up and reopening was, in their minds, the normal, responsible thing to do. But it is a devastating reminder of how fragile the truth is in those first hours. A crime scene is a story written in tiny, fragile details, and it can only be read once. Wipe it down, walk through it, tidy it up, and the story is gone. You can't get it back. Not with all the detectives and all the decades in the world. 4 young people were abducted from that building. The room where it happened had their killer's presence in it. Some trace, some clue, something, and it was erased forever by good people acting on a bad assumption before the sun had fully set on the day they went missing. That, to me, is the real tragedy hiding inside this tragedy. The answer may have been right there, and we washed it away.
I want to bring it back to the 4 of them, because they are so easily lost in the horror of how it ended. Jayne Friedt was 20, a young woman trusted to run a restaurant, to lock up, to be responsible, and she was, right to the end. Ruth Ellen Shelton was 18, with her whole adult life just beginning, and Daniel Davis and Mark Flemmons were 16 years old, boys, working an ordinary after-school job exactly where their parents would have wanted them to be. Safe, employed, earning a little money on a weeknight. There was nothing reckless here. No dark road they shouldn't have been on, no risk they took. They went to work. They closed a restaurant. and for reasons that have never been explained by people who have never been named, they were taken out to the woods and murdered, all four of them, on a cold November night. Their families have spent more than 40 years without an answer. Parents who buried teenagers, parents who died still not knowing who did it or why. A community that has never forgotten, in a town where people still know exactly which building it was. 4 kids closed a restaurant and never came home. And the people who did it are, as far as the law is concerned, still out there or gone to their graves with the secret. So, I'll leave it with you the way I always do. What do you believe happened at the Burger Chef in 1978? Was it a robbery that spiraled into murder? Was one of those 4 young people the real target and the others simply in the wrong place? Was it one killer, or, as the evidence hints, more than one? And how much of the answer disappeared with the mop water in those first 2 days when everyone assumed the worst about 4 kids who had done nothing wrong? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And on this one, I especially want to hear from anyone who remembers this case, or that town. I'm Gravenfield. The cases that were closed but never solved. If you made it this far, you understand exactly what this channel is. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there. And if you're ever the first to find that something is wrong, don't clean it up. Don't touch a thing. Just call someone and wait.